Hey guys, so I want to make this short video about weight loss and breastfeeding. I've talked about this before, but a thing that keeps coming up and a question that's not getting answered is how many calories do you need to breastfeed, and how many calories do you need to lose weight while breastfeeding? And the discussions on this tend to go back and forwards between either just eat healthily and the weight will just fall off because that's what happened to someone, and this isn't a time to think about weight loss, so just like focus on your baby and focus on yourself and don't think about trying to lose weight. And there's no sort of like middle ground. There's no gray area that we're discussing in these conversations. So I want to talk today about a little bit about that grey area and about some of the things that aren't getting talked about, because it's way more complicated. There are way more varying factors than most people think. And also, for some women, the weight will just fall off, and for some women will put on weight during breastfeeding. Hopefully, this video will explain a little bit why that is, but I'll make a more comprehensive video on that another time. And the final thing I want to say, just as a little kind of prelude to the main point I want to make, is that it's absolutely true that this is not necessarily the time to focus on weight loss, but for some women it is. And when it is, what most women tend to do is they tend to eat 1,200 calories a day, and that is a really, really, really crappy strategy. And or they cut out food groups, or they do other crazy stuff. So if you want to lose weight while you're breastfeeding or in the postpartum period, I think that's a legitimate goal for some women, but you need to do it sensibly. You can't be an idiot about it and just cut your calories completely. You gotta understand a little bit about how the body works. So hopefully this will explain a little bit about that today, and we're going to go into some of the nuances of why it's so much more complicated than people really make out. So first of all, I want to start with the number 300 to 500 calories per day. So this is the number that's kind of thrown around. I don't know if you can even see that because of the glare. Never mind. So 300 to 500 calories a day is sort of what people say. Oh, that's what breastfeeding. That's the number of calories that you burn while breastfeeding. So the reason why that's such a big difference is mainly because of this. So I've put up here 2 weeks postpartum. So let's say you're 2 weeks postpartum and you're exclusively breastfeeding. So your baby's tiny, and even though you're exclusively breastfeeding, the amount of milk that is needed to sustain a 2-week-old that maybe weighs 4 kilos, 3.5 kilos, like maybe less, that's not going to be a huge amount. Whereas if you're exclusively breastfeeding a 6-month-old who weighs 7 kilos, that's going to be, we're talking about 7 kilos versus 3.5 kilos or whatever. Obviously babies can that's twice as much. So the chances are is that your body's going to be burning almost twice as much, or using twice as much calories the amount of calories that are needed, the amount of energy that's needed to create enough milk for a two-week-old is going to be way less, probably about half of what it takes to maintain to supply enough milk to a 6-month-old. Now, if you're not exclusively breastfeeding, let's say you're supplementing with formula at this stage, you're not going to be burning, that might actually be like an extra 500 calories, whereas this might be more like 300 calories, okay? But if you're like supplementing formula half the time, a third of the time, most of the time by this age, then you will be using significantly less than 500 calories a day, creating enough milk for your baby. Someone like me, I'm not breastfeeding. I'm 6 months postpartum. I'm not breastfeeding anymore. I'm not going to be, that 500 calories does not apply to me, obviously. I think that's obvious to most people. But then if we skip to like 1 year postpartum, you might be breastfeeding once or twice a day. Your baby's probably eating solids by now. So let's say you're just breastfeeding once a day before bed. So even though your child is enormous now, you don't need as much milk as you did for exclusively breastfeeding a 6-month-old. This is why it's such a complicated issue, because we can't just throw the number 500 calories out there, because you could be burning way more or way less depending on how big your baby is and whether or not you're exclusively breastfeeding. So that's the first like tricky issue when it comes to breastfeeding and calories. The second kind of tricky issue is that all the things that go into creating into how many calories you're burning are also going to be changing as compared to what you were doing during pregnancy and what you were doing prior to pregnancy. Everything's changed, and people tend to sort of throw around, oh, it's hormones. I really don't buy like the whole hormone thing. It's not to do with hormones. There are other more concrete things that we can that I'm sure hormones play a part, but there are way more concrete things we can look at first. And I'm a big fan of, if you hear hooves, think of horses, not unicorns. So let's think about the more concrete, more solid things that we can think of first. So the things that might go into the most obvious things that jump to mind for me is like if you're 2 weeks postpartum, right, you're going to be moving around a hell of a lot less. Okay, that's NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Like you're going to be, if you had been moving around, quite a bit during pregnancy or before having a baby, all the activity that you do in the postpartum period, 2 weeks postpartum, you're resting, you're burning far fewer calories through your daily activities, and that could be significantly less. Now, you're not going to be exercising at all. So let's say if you were exercising like 3 times a week before you got pregnant. Now you're not exercising at all, not at all. So you're going to be burning far fewer calories through eat or through exercise. Then we could talk about BMR. Your BMR is a really tricky one, because on the one hand, your BMR will have gone down because it will have gone down from before pregnancy. You're not like pregnancy, your BMR, your basic metabolic rate has gone up in order to sustain the life and grow a baby. Now it's going to go down because you're not doing that anymore. But at the same time, BMR might go up because you're recovering from tears, from a C-section, from all of the trauma of pregnancy, and recovery increases our basic metabolic rate. So BMR is a really tricky one, and you might have lost muscle mass during pregnancy, something like that, but that's not going to be a big factor. But BMR is gonna be different at this stage. Then if we skip to 6 months postpartum, you're going to be way more active than you were 2 weeks postpartum. At least we would hope so. So then your daily you're going to burn more calories through your daily activities. You've probably hopefully started exercising again by that point. Now, some women won't have, but let's say you have started exercising 3 times a week. So that's going to look like that's going to have gone up as well, the exercise. And your BMR, again, like maybe it's gone down a little bit, like because you're not in that recovery mode, the initial postpartum recovery. So that would have gone down a little bit, but probably not significantly. So that's why this isn't such an interesting number. And then 1 year postpartum, I mean, we could just say the same things. You're probably going to be just as active as 6 months postpartum. And that's going to be so different from woman to woman. But again, those calories that you're burning from breastfeeding aren't going to be as significant. So just to give you a bit of a visual, on this graph this is the number of calories up here. So I've got 1,000 and 2,000. So this is somebody who's somebody who's not pregnant, not had a baby. So this is BMR around the 1,300 mark. You probably can't see my writing here. Then there's TEF, which is from digestion. Then we've got NEAT, which is the activity. And then we've got EAT. So it works out around 2,000, right? Around 2,000 a day. Okay, this is just really general numbers that I'm throwing around. Then we've got the 2 week period. BMR is going to be more or less the same, digestion more or less the same, but your NEAT's going to be significantly lower and there's no exercise. So all of that is lower, but then if I add about 300 calories, again, I'm picking the lower end of that 300, 500 calorie mark from breastfeeding, it still doesn't even bring me back up to the basic rate that I was, that 2,000 calories that I was burning prior to pregnancy. So then if I jump to 6 months postpartum, and then that's a reason why, you might be putting on weight in that postpartum period, even though you're not changing what you're eating. And this isn't even looking at pregnancy, during my final trimester of pregnancy, I might have been burning way more. So I've gotten used to eating more calories. Then if I jump to 6 months postpartum, I've got my BMR is around the same, digestion is around the same, but now my NEAT is way higher because I'm moving around and I'm doing more things. I'm not just sitting and trying to recover from birth. But then I might actually be doing exercise as well. So all that has brought me back up to what I was doing before getting pregnant. But then now 6 months postpartum, I'm not, but in this example, this person is exclusively breastfeeding a 6-month-old. So that might jump me up to 2,000, this is breastfeeding, that might jump me up to 2,500 calories, okay? So this is just how complex and how much it can change, and how different it can be from month to month, and how much you're breastfeeding and how much you're doing. There are so many factors that go into it. It's extremely complicated and it can look so different from person to person and from woman to woman. So there are so many moving parts, there are so many different factors. So this is one of the reasons why some women are losing loads of weight and some women aren't losing any weight. You've got to think about all the different factors and how they all weave together, and to create the number of calories that you're burning per day.